So it's been a while since I've done one of these videos here online. I've been taking some time to process my own thoughts, and I've been sharing some of those thoughts through writing because that's how I like to process. But my blogs are long form because they're written for me, and I offer them for anybody who's interested. But I know some people aren't going to sit around and read a very long post that circles around itself and revisits thoughts as I work it out in real time as I'm typing. And so I offer this as kind of a synopsis of the last post that I made. And I think I want to just offer this in video form in case somebody would rather receive it that way and you don't have time for the blogs. I think it's unclear to us right now when these restrictions we have are going to lift. And I think that even when things get back to normal for the government, that we're still going to find our rhythms are going to be a bit off. The stability of normalcy is great for the human psyche, but an obsession with it is dangerous because what happens when we're thrown out of normal? If we don't know how to adapt, well, then we're going to suffer. And I don't think it's very pleasing to God either to wish our life away, even when things aren't great. Sure, we want things to be better, but we shouldn't wish our life away when right now could be an opportunity to learn something different from God because times are different. What's He trying to teach us in the moment? Let's not sacrifice that by wishing it away. I think we're all realizing, and I think I've seen a lot of this online, that we're finding it harder to be still and know that God is who He says He is, as the psalmist asks us to do, or God asks us in the Psalms to be still and know that He is God. It's in troubled times where we need this the most, but that's where we don't want to be still because we'd rather be distracted from the fact that this world has always been a dark place. And actually, plagues and pestilence as well as war and famine aren't actually uncommon, but we just live in an uncommon time where we haven't had to face these things in our own lives. But throughout history, this has been reality. Now, we all want to get back to normal again, and that's fine. What's wrong with wanting some personal interaction? Nothing. We all should want it. But what I want to say to us is this. Thinking that getting back to normal means things will be okay because right now we feel pain and that would just be the solution, well, that's a problem. Because if there's pain right now simply because we're not around the crowds, may be an indication that we're using people, objectifying them to just simply distract us. Being around other people doesn't mean we're not alone. It doesn't mean that we're not truly isolated. It just makes isolation more unnoticeable. Perhaps paradoxically, what we're having here is a realization that we enjoy being lost in the crowd. We want to be alone, just not this sort of solitude, because really being alone exposes us to our place before God because we start to hear our thoughts. Like people who can't sleep at night without the TV on because they don't want to hear their thoughts. Perhaps this stillness is uncomfortable because we're actually hearing from ourselves for the first time. So this can be a difficult moment for us. Are you replacing the distractions of everyday life with other busyness right now? If we can't get lost in the crowds, are we feeling exposed? Are we moving fast to our social media? Do you like the person who is there when no one else is around and you're just left with your thoughts? And even if you're an essential worker right now, or you're slammed busy because you're having to homeschool your kids on top of your work at home, even if that's the case, what's happening right now for a lot of us is we're being exposed to ourselves even if we're not in solitude because there is this immediate threat that's out there and that brings about some mental and emotional pain. And pain is a screaming from within of, hey, pay attention to what's going on. So we begin to pay attention to what's really in our hearts and what really is important to us. And maybe we're getting to know ourselves in different ways, no matter if that is just because we're alone or if that's because we are in a little bit of distress. Who's the person that you find standing before God? Who's the person you find in yourself asking the real questions right now? And do you like that person? Is that person a selfless person? Is that person humble? Is that person wanting to give of themselves to others? Or does the person just want to use others as a distraction? Are you learning to become your true self as you sit still before God? Is He shaping you? Or are you more uncomfortable in the stillness? Are you becoming sanctified? Or are you becoming more and more worried? And who could be exposed to the love of God in our stillness and not find places where our sin is exposed and we feel uncomfortable? But know that in our stillness, or in when we go inside of ourselves and meet that person there, that person standing before God, God's not trying to shame that person and run them off, but God's trying to reorient that person to be the sort of person that He can send out into the world. So maybe this is a time to evaluate the person that's being sent out as an ambassador for God. If you're uncomfortable with that person and yet you're wanting to go out in ministry, well, what does that mean? Perhaps this person that we're dealing with when we're quiet and alone and we're exposed before God, when the lights shine on that person, perhaps that person needs to be grown, and our pain and our discomfort can be a sign that we need to change. Every day we need to be changing and more in the likeness of God. Don't feel guilty and run away. Let that person, in all of his or her brokenness, be healed by God in His presence. Allow God to take you and begin to reorient you. Allow yourself to be exposed before God in stillness. Don't run. Allow the questions to come up, and don't ask them just of yourself and torture yourself. And that might be why you don't like that person, because you're trying to wrestle it all down and stuff it all down. Let that person stand before God, and let that person be the true self that steps aside from worry and stress, because that person is oriented to God, who is love, and allow that person to have Christ's love run through them. Or should I say better, you. Be truly who you're called to be, and be more of yourself than you've ever been before. And this is the time to allow that to happen. Be still and know that He is God. And when we have that knowledge within ourselves, when that person inside who's crying out for something can realize this truth about God, well, then that person can find comfort in the stillness and is not worried when things are topsy-turvy, because God is a fixed point of love. And then we can become that fixed point of love for others, stability for others in this time of chaos and mayhem. And when things go back to normal, we can launch out into ministry in love, and not simply because, well, it's what's required of us, but it's because it's who we are, because that's who God's shaping us to be. Think on these things and be blessed.